Welcome to Heartland Dual Sport. Oh my goodness.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled broadcast for this very important message.
Recently we were asked a question and I bumped this video up ahead of a bunch of the other ones that were scheduled because in my mind it's a very important message that I want to share with you guys. Along with showing you how to adjust the preload on your new KLR, I also want to show you a step that's often overlooked. Maybe it's forgotten about, but it is something that it could lead to a citation or worse yet a wreck. Todd recently asked a question on one of our videos, and here's how it reads. He said he is a larger rider and he's considering a Gen 3 KLR for his next purchase. He wants to make sure that his bike will hold his weight. So in today's video, we're going to be answering Todd's question. Along with answering the question, we're going to be showing you how to adjust the preload on your KLR. Okay, for starters, we're going to go ahead and get out the owner's manual. If you'll turn to page 142 in your owner's manual, we're going to be going over at the very left side of page 142. You're going to see where there's no real adjustment for your front forks. However, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adjusting the rear shock so it will help adjust your bike according to your weight. Along with the owner's manual, you're going to need a number 12 size socket, maybe even an extension and a little wrench or a T-handled wrench, whatever you may have in your shop. And then the other common tool that you're going to need is a flathead screwdriver. And then again, when we're talking about the step that's most often overlooked, you're going to need a Phillips screwdriver. You're probably not going to see that in other videos because I'm just not seeing it addressed there, but I don't want you to have an accident or get a ticket. Now that we've gotten all the official stuff out of the way, let's do this, guys. Okay guys, starting with the preload, again I've taken the side panel off of my bike just to make it easier for the video purposes, but you do not need to do this. This is going to be the left side of your bike. As you guys can see, there's the battery straight in front, and the bolt that we're going to be looking for to adjust the preload is that bolt right there. And if you can see those yellow markings are actually outlined in the book on page 143, and they show you exactly what they are. But again, with a 12mm socket, you're just going to reach in here. And again, you do not have to take the side panels off. I did that just for video purposes. There's one click, there's two clicks. That's position number one. We're going to roll it down and go back up. When you're doing this and going up, it's a little bit harder. And I don't know if you can see this, but the bike is actually raising up a little bit. There's one click, there's two clicks, three clicks, and it's raised the bike up. So again, you can see we're at the top. You don't want to go any higher than that. There's a total of 5 clicks. Alright, again guys, as you can see, we're on the right hand side of the bike now, and I've kind of zoomed out so that you can get a better look at what we're looking at. But basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at this screw head, which is at the bottom of the shock. It's going to be at the center of your screen right now. And this is where your flathead screwdriver comes in, and you're just going to put your flathead screwdriver right in there, and you can make your adjustments for your rebound, turning it back and forth. Now essentially that's going to be basically the speed at which your shock recovers after hitting a bump. Okay, for the Phillips screwdriver that I told you you're going to need, and which is one of the most important steps that's most often overlooked after you've adjusted your suspension, I've got this zoomed out so you can get a general idea where we're going to be using the screwdriver at. And what we're going to be doing is adjusting the headlight to the proper height so that you're not blinding oncoming traffic and or getting a ticket. So that's the screw is right down here, and as you can see, it's going to be basically the only gold screw down there. And we'll make that adjustment real quick, and I'm going to show you what you're looking for. So here's where we're at, guys. We've got our preload adjusted to the max, or right there in that range where we think it ought to be. Again, I'm a 215, 20-pound guy when I've got my riding gear on, and I normally carry another 100 pounds of gear on the back. So what happens, if you can picture it just kind of like an archer, what's going to happen to your headlight when you change your anchor point? So if you see the tip of my arrow it's pointing kind of slightly down right now, but you go ahead and you add a bunch of weight to the back of your bike, now my arrow's pointing level, go down a little bit more with a little bit more weight, and now my arrow's pointing up. The same thing happens to your headlight, and that's why I say this is a critical step that's most often overlooked when you're talking about adjusting your rear suspension, getting your preload right. You want to make sure that your headlights are right. We're into fall now, guys. You're going to be running your headlights much earlier than you were in the middle of the summer, so getting your headlight adjusted is just as crucial as getting your suspension set up, and it's a byproduct of adjusting your suspension. What I'm going to do real quickly is I'm going to show you, we've already measured that basically the bottom of the headlight is 39.5 inches to the bottom part where the light and the beam's going to be coming out. Over here on this other wall, I've got a black tarp nailed up, and I've also got a string that's going to be indicating that 39.5 inch mark, and I'm going to show you. We're going to set the bike up level, and I'm going to flip this other camera on real quick, and I'm going to show you the bike. We're going to stand the bike up to where it's vertical, turn the headlight on, but right now my headlight is adjusted just below that mark, which means that it shouldn't be in the other eyes of drivers oncoming traffic. Now then, I'm going to get on the bike. Again, I don't have all my gear on, and you want to make sure that your bike's roughly level, but you can see now in the video on the other camera with the black screen and the white line is that 39.5 inch mark. We're already up to where we're actually a hair above that line. This is no weight, this is my weight on the bike, and you notice I'm kind of bouncing a little bit, let the bike settle in. Right now I can tell you that would probably be okay for the adjustment on the headlight if I didn't have my riding gear on and I didn't have any luggage loaded. But as I scoot back further on the back into the bike, you can see just that little bit of weight shift right there. We're already above the line. So that's why it's important when you're adjusting your preload, you need to go ahead and readjust your headlight, your main beam of your headlight, so that when you put the high beam on, you're actually going to be seeing in front of you and not up in the trees. Secondary to that is you really need to do this adjustment with your bike loaded and all the gear on your bike that you're planning on using for that particular trip. Is this something that you're going to have to do all the time? It depends on how you ride your bike. But if you typically are commuting back and forth to work and you've got X amount of weight on your bike, I would adjust it for that, and just know that if you're planning on taking a 2-week moto camping trip and you're going to have another 50 or 60 pounds on the back of your bike, I would readjust the headlight beam so that you're not going to be getting yourself, number one, you don't want to be blinding other drivers. 2, you don't want to be getting a ticket. And then 3, worst case scenario, you blind another driver and you accidentally get involved in an accident because you blinded them. Those are 3 really, really key points as to why this is so important. It's a little bitty screw, it's easy to fix, and you can do it on the fly. Let's just say you picked up some gear while you was on your 2-week moto camping trip. Have that little screwdriver in your bag so that you can readjust your light if you need to. Okay, Todd, so hopefully this has helped answer your question on how you can make the adjustments yourself. And here's where I've got it. Here's where we're at. You've only got, as I showed you, we've only got basically 5 adjustments from soft to hardest on the preload. That's only going to carry you so far. So in answer to your question about the KLR and its adjustments, I believe with your weight you would be just fine with the bike. Here's where the caveat comes in. If you decide that you want to start doing some moto camping or something like that, you may need to look into a spring upgrade at the very least on your rear shock. And if you wanted to get real technical, you might look at a different spring rate for the front forks as well as the rear. I know this is not something that you may want to hear, but I've also got to follow up with this, and so that you understand completely where I'm coming from with this. As many of you know, I used to have the Honda Africa Twin. You could argue that that suspension from the factory is better than the KLR, and you could potentially win that argument. I don't want to argue about it, but what I'm going to say is this: depending on your riding style, depending on how much you weigh, when the manufacturers are making these bikes for the general consumer, they're going with a generic spring rate. And where it's going to come into play is if you're a really small guy or you're a really large guy, you may have to actually spend a little bit of money to make the adjustments to increase or make your ride better. I'm going to throw up a picture real quick, and I'm going to show you a couple of the guys that I went riding with in Michigan. And as you can see in this picture, I look pretty small, and I'm a pretty good sized guy. Both of the guys on either side of me, which basically are huge men, they've got their own channel, and they're also part of our Gen 3 Tribe group on Facebook. Both of them are admins on the group, and both of them have the same KLR that I do, minus one of them has ABS and I don't. They're riding this bike, they're doing moto camping adventure trips, and they're probably, like me, I'm pushing the maximum spring rate by the time I load my gear for a 2 or 3 week trip. It's still working. Where it may not work is if you decide that you're going to be riding 2 up. If you've got a passenger on the back along with you and your weight is getting on up there, your combined weight is that 300 to 400, 500 pounds, you're probably going to have to increase your spring rate. Now, I will go on to say this, since we talked about the Africa Twin. When I had my Africa Twin, I loaded that thing down. I'm not a suspension expert, guys, but what I had access to in Oklahoma City was a guy who was. I loaded everything down and I rode my bike over to his place. He did different spring rates for my front forks as well as my rear shock. It was relatively inexpensive. I think it was maybe $400 or $500 to have him do both front and rear shock, the springs in the front forks and the rear shock. Same with the DRZ. I did the same thing with the DRZ. If you guys go back and watch some of my moto camping videos, that bike is so small. I had stuff stacked almost like a sissy bar on the back of my bike. It's just not spread out like the loads are on the KLR. So in answer to your question, and depending on your riding style, depending on how hard you're going to be riding the bike and how much you plan on doing with the bike, I would say this: for your weight and where you're at on your weight, you could bump this up to either the 4 or 5, the max preload, and you're going to have no troubles commuting back and forth to work, that kind of stuff. If you start riding in rougher terrain, my suggestion would be stand up, and it takes a little bit of stress off the bike when you're also working with the bike, using your legs as an additional cushion, if you will. Next to that is, if you're going to be riding 2 up, you're probably going to want to adjust your spring rates and maybe go with something better. I know that Cogent was a very well-known name. They build the whole kit. I'm here to tell you guys that kit is expensive. You're talking $1,200, $1,500, $1,600 for just the rear shock, and that's again, it's a totally redesigned from the ground up plug and play deal. You don't have to take your original shock apart, and you don't have to take it to the shop, but it is very expensive. My suggestion would be is if you live in anywhere near a bigger city, odds are there's somebody there that races dirt bikes and does dirt bike suspension, and he's going to be the guy that you probably want to talk to, because most of those guys are so familiar with the spring rates, changing out the springs on the front forks and the rear shock. They're going to have all the tools to do it. They're going to know how to calculate the spring rate. They can adjust your sag, which we're not going to go into on this video because that's just a lot more in depth, but they can measure your sag, measure your spring rate, measure basically what the bike's doing with you on it, with all your gear loaded up, ready to go, and then affordably replace the springs, which is a much cheaper option than, like I say, buying just a totally rebuilt shock. Now, with that said, the shock from Cogent, it's amazing. It's top of the line and it's super high quality. If you've got that kind of money in your budget, I would definitely contact them, let them know what your weight, your size, weight, and what you plan to carry is. They can custom build you their top of the line shock, and it's going to be amazing. I've heard nothing but good things from that company, and I know that they truly have devoted a full line to the KLR. Again, I don't own their stuff, I can't afford their stuff, but I know from talking to others it's great equipment. Again, I appreciate your question. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope that you've learned something. If you've learned anything or you've gotten any value out of this video, please give us a thumbs up. Please share this video with others, because I think a lot of times, guys, we're missing the mark on helping other new riders. If you don't adjust your headlight when you're adjusting your suspension, you're asking for trouble. Whether, like I say, we've named off 3 ways you could get in trouble. anything from costing you money to costing you time in the hospital. Guys, let's be safe out here. Let's do everything we can to help others. Again, share this video with your friends, your family, anybody that rides a motorcycle. If they're ever going to be adjusting their suspension, just share this with them and let them know, hey, you need to follow up with your headlight. Again, we appreciate your likes, comments, and subscribes. May you have a blessed week, and let's go ride. Along with showing you how to adjust your suspension on your new KLR650, I want to show you a step that is most often overlooked, and it could be something that could cause you to get a ticket, worse yet, be involved in an accident, and it's something that I just think is too important for us to not to mention when talking about adjusting the suspension on your KLR. So let's get to the video.